Parallax. You are now tuned into the Parallax Effect. It's not the message, it's the messenger. What up, Ryan? It's time. Parallax. Oatmeal's better than no meal. Guess who's back to make mountains out of molehills? If this don't move you, I bet my folks will. This beat's smooth, but trust me, there ain't no chill. Ask Ryan, if I'm lying, I'm flying. It's the sculpture of all aspects of the culture. Parallax. The People's Podcast is back, laying it down flat for you wherever you at. Your job, or your car, or your jog, or your flight. Loads of archives with no ending in sight. Hitting on any topic, long as it ain't no nonsense. You can see the others for the drama and the gossip. Word to Brett, best there ever was, recognize it. Never secondary, my eyes stay on the pocket. Parallax. And if you feeling the vibes, give us 5 stars. Oh, and follow and subscribe. Parallax. Sit back and recline, relax and enjoy the ride. Cause it's that Parallax. And you just passed the test. This is the Parallax Effect. Come on, Parallax. Sit back and recline, relax and enjoy the ride. Cause it's that Parallax. And you're here, that's mad respect. Welcome to the Parallax Effect. Yeah.
Welcome back to the Parallax Effect. Ryan Lavelle, your host here with another exciting episode. I'm really happy to bring you one of my friends, the guest that we have today, all the way from the East Coast, hailing from Pennsylvania. We have Mr. Justin Brown is in the Parallax Effect. Justin Brown is a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. Now, let me get this straight. He's been doing this before it was mainstream, before it had a name, before it had an acronym. He's been doing it for over 16 years. He's a graduate of Indiana University of Pennsylvania. That's the Crimson Hawks, y'all. And his many roles include, he is the idea practitioner for NASA. We're going to get into that. He is also the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion of the Downingtown area school district in Pennsylvania. I believe that's Chester County. He is also the CEO and president of Onward and Upward, which is a college preparatory program for underestimated students, as well as creator and president of the Diversity Awareness Program. That is DAP for short. Please welcome, and I'm going to give you an applause here if I can get my buttons right. Mr. Justin Brown, welcome to the Parallax Effect.
Hey, thanks, man. It's good to be in effect.
Appreciate you, man. So yeah, just wanted to really talk to you and interview you about your journey, about your travels, about how you came to find, especially before it was mainstream or before it was a popular thing. How you found the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because I don't think this is something that everybody or anybody plans to be in or do, right? It's not something you can study. I think this work is best done through experiences. And what I mean by that is the most fundamental aspect about doing this work is making intentional relationships. Does your personality and characteristics align so that you could do that, right? Can you bring people together? Can you bridge gaps? Doesn't matter if you're on this side, doesn't matter if you're on this side, can you connect people back together? Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that can be taught, but the number one thing that can't be taught is whether you care about people, right? Either you care about them or you don't. So your question, how did I get into this work? I think the trajectory didn't really give me a choice, right? I didn't choose the DEI life. The DEI life chose me. So I grew up in a small town called Coatesville, PA, known for some of the best high school sports in the country, and known for steel, right? We were one of the biggest manufacturers of steel at the time when the city was its most prominent. Some of that steel was used in the World Trade Center. And it's a very diverse community. If you were to come here, you would see people of all walks and lives and backgrounds and lived experiences and identities living together, right? With little to no resistance, barriers, nothing. It's almost sort of like a utopia. Now, if you ask people about this city, they'll tell people, "Oh, it's a bad city," and that couldn't be further from the truth. This is a very prideful city that loves its citizens. The citizens genuinely love each other. These are people that look different. So you get whites and blacks living right next door to each other, and they've lived there for 40 years, and they're best friends, right? It's something that you would never see, right? Hispanic population, Asian population, LGBT population, like everybody's together, and it just works. So when I went to my first, when I went to my first institution of higher learning, before I went to IUP, I had like a reverse culture shock, right? So now everybody doesn't look like me. I'm the first person of color that some of these people have ever met, and they're asking me very microaggressive questions like, "Hey, are you here on a basketball scholarship? Hey, I heard you're from outside Philadelphia. Do you rap? Do you have a gun? Do you have these things?" And I told you at the beginning, this work is best accepted and developed through experiences, because I can't be the spokesperson for every single black person that lives, right? Even though a lot of people want to put us in those boxes. I tell people, if you walk into a barbershop and you ask them who are the best 5 players that have ever played in the NBA, you would get a multitude of answers, right? Because everybody has different opinions. So what I did was I created a student group, and at the time that group was called Building Bridges. And essentially what we did was we went through high activities, icebreakers, team builders, all dealing with concepts of DEI. So you would have people of all walks and backgrounds in the room, and we would have a subject, and we would talk about those things. But we would go through interactive games, activities, role plays, social experiments, and people were really getting to know each other. We were challenging people. I want you to go. We're going to challenge some of these norms. So if we had 100 people in a room, we say, "Okay, I challenge you that if you see somebody who's different than you sitting in the cafeteria that looks different," because what you notice, even in high school, it transcends to college. We walk into a college dining hall, you see all the football players together, you see all the black students together, all the white students on that side, all the Asian students. I said, I challenge you to break down those norms. So we had people that were coming back to the meetings and talking about, "Hey, I saw someone who was different than me, and I asked if I could sit with them for lunch, and here was my experience, and this is what I learned." So we started walking to the cafeteria, and it started changing, right? The way that people were sitting in classrooms changed a little bit. You walked in the library, things started changing, right? We actually had professors, people that were on the board of trustees, people that were on the president's cabinet, then start to come in and join. And what I would say to them was, you can't just sit and observe this, right? This work is better absorbed. You need to be a part of it. So people were making it very intentional relationships. And what we were doing got a lot of attention statewide. And individuals were like, "Wow, this is great. How do we do this?" And that's kind of when the marketing of this became a thing, right? And I went and got nationally trained in NCBI. That's the National Coalition Building Institute. I went through the National Civil Rights Databases to get training that way. I went through bystander intervention training. I went through crucial courageous conversations training, like all the training that I could suck up, that I could receive so I could do this work. And I started doing it as an independent contractor through an LLC under a different name, which is Diversity Awareness Program. During that 15-year time, since that time, I've probably been to about 600 universities, and I've spoken. I've been to countless amount of national conferences. I did my first professional sports team a little bit right after George Floyd died, and I think we should talk about that because I think that was a turning point for what this work was. But I did work with the Minnesota Twins baseball team. We did some training through that.
And what was that experience like? Some of the universities that you went through, you're obviously talking to, individuals from all over the country or maybe even from other countries. And what was that like holding those conversations and doing those trainings with those institutions and teams?
Yeah, I have a blast doing it. It's almost second nature to me now. It's great to have light bulb moments, right? No one likes to be talked at. No one does. Because everybody goes through trainings. It was great. And then you leave and you don't remember anything, right? And Dr. Maya Angelou says that people will never remember what you told them, but they will always remember how you made them feel.
Feel.
So for me, I can't just come and say, here's what you should do. I need you to experience it. I need you to flex those muscles, be a part of it, develop the language, develop the understanding, develop how to have those crucial intercultural conversations so that when I leave, you can continue to do them, right? You don't need a Justin Brown in order to do this work. You all could do this work without me. Let me show you how you can do it without me, right? And give people those tools to be successful. I think people are really on edge for what those trainings look like. These trainings look like crucial, courageous conversations, implicit bias, microaggressions, stereotypes, perceptions, bystander intervention. All of those things are key to this training. But how can you do it in a way that brings people together? And what I decided was I would always have my trainings to be upbeat, no shame-based paradigm, and to allow people to truly have interactions with each other, because I felt like the students were going to school with each other, but they weren't going to school with each other, right? The fact is they're working with each other, but they're not working with each other. They're just working with each other. So there were people that have known each other for years in my training and found out things about others in the trainings that they never found out before. And it's awkward, Ryan. Like, you can't really go up to someone and say, hey, let's talk about institutional racism. Like, that's not an opening, right? And in these workplaces and in these institutions of higher learning, especially when you're in the classroom, unless it's a topic, you can't really dive into, hey, here's what my experience is. Right or wrong, this is just how I see life. This is just my lens, right? I don't think anyone's lens is wrong. I think that everybody has a perspective based on what they've seen, based on what they've experienced, based on what they've been told, what they've read. And our job as educators, because everybody's an educator, right? I don't care what level of educational experience you have. Someone has something to bring to the table that I don't know, and I want to be able to figure out what that is so that I can know it. So I gain a better perspective. But we all have to be able to say, hey, listen, I might not agree with you, but I understand where you're coming from, right? We can disagree without being disagreeable. What I try to tell people is it's not about being right. It's about being relational. So if I tell you my experience, and I do this activity sometimes called, what do you see when you see me? I'll ask people, what do you see when you see me? And they go, oh, I see a nice guy, or I see a tall guy, or I see, a guy with a beard, or I see an intelligent guy, right? And I said, no. What do you see when you see me, right? And usually it's a person of color, usually someone black, and they say, black man. I say, thank you, right? That's that elephant around the room that people want to talk about. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I'm a black man. That's a lens that I wear. They didn't just tell me that day. I didn't wake up like, right? I knew that this was a thing. It's an identity that I carry. People see it when I walk into a room. I'm not just a black face. I'm also a black voice. And there's experiences that I've had in my life. Some of them attributed to the color of my skin, some of it not attributed to the color of my skin. That has shaped my perspective. And you got to have people that are in that room that can have that perspective with you, right? You can't have one without the other. And that's where I think it's hard in the country for people to come and have a dialogue about this, because everybody wants to show up and say, I'm right. How I perceive this is it. And I'm trying to get individuals to think a little bit more broader and think a little bit more easier, right? So you're saying, well, what do you mean by that, right? I don't think DEI is this big old thing that you have to go to school for and learn all these things. It's human reasoning, right? So like diversity, who is in the room, right? Do we have all representation in the room? Equity, who's trying to get into the room but they can't, right? Another piece of equity is like, does everybody have what they need to stay in this room? It doesn't matter if we get them in, but we can't keep them, right? That retention and recruitment piece. And I think the last piece of it is that inclusion part, right? Because you can feel included, but you don't feel like you belong, right? And those are hard things for people to grasp. Like, well, we brought them, we asked them their opinion, but yeah, you asked them, but did they really feel like they were a part of it, right? So inclusion being, has everyone's ideas been heard, and who are we impacting, right? Because our intent doesn't always meet the impact. We try to make sure that it does, but it doesn't necessarily always do that.
And I think that's a phenomenal explanation of the entire term, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I even, learned more from you just speaking about it just now. And I would have thought that I could have recited the meeting right off the top of my head because, I'm involved in these conversations as well. But some of the more important things that everything was important that you said, but some of the things that you stood out to me was you're giving people a platform to express themselves. And I think in this era, in this day and time where kind of free speech is clashing with cancel culture, where does that kind of connect and how does that fit? So enabling folks to chat and express their feelings, but not be disagreeable, as you just said, is a crucial component of how we can all remain educators, like you said, in our own right. I want to stick with the moment that George Floyd was killed, because that, I think, was a watershed moment in this country, and it actually directly or indirectly led to you and I meeting, because at that time, companies and teams and institutions were putting out statements. And at the hospital that I worked at the time, a couple of us had got together and we had asked, why is this hospital not putting out some kind of statement? And up until then, there's the ramblings that you have with your coworkers and people where, these type of topics come up and you kind of condense them a little bit because it's the workplace. But we felt like this would be a good opportunity to put that stuff out there. Like, hey, there are conversations and there are microaggressions and there are things that are happening within this company that we think should be addressed. And we were first met with resistance from the CEO, basically, long story short, saying that, like, there's no discrimination in this hospital. It stops as soon as somebody walks into the property. Like, that's literally what he thought. Like, it was left outside, and he thought he could make a speech and say, well, if you're caught or if you're known to be someone that is discriminatory, you will be fired. And that would be just, that would prevent or cause people to not act upon their feelings. And once we tried to express that that's a little superficial, that's not true, then we had to break through I'm colorblind and I don't see color. And we had to explain, I'm glad you touched on that. Like, who am I? Like, I am a Black man, and it is okay to see that. And you think you're shying away from racism by being colorblind, but you're actually not recognizing someone for who they are and what they bring to the table and what their history means to them. So anyway, we moved forward with that, and we pressed and pressed and pressed. And then that's how actually the CEO invited you to talk to us about diversity training and diversity officers. And what I really thought was that he thought he could bring you on and control the conversation. And I really thought that he saw like how comfortable the group was with you, like right off the bat, like how we introduced ourselves and how we just kind of took over the conversation. I think he felt, that's just what I think. I don't know. I'm not going to speak for anybody, and I don't, mean to bring any negative connotations towards anybody or anything like that. I can just speak from my experience. I thought that, he thought he could control the narrative, and that was slipping away. And long story short, we didn't move forward with that. But because that incident was not addressed by us, and we actually wanted to bring you on to train our entire hospital, that was one of the steps, or one of the, I guess, dominoes that fell, that ended in all of us. And there was 5 of us on that entire panel. We all eventually walked away from that hospital. And we all felt justified for doing so because our concerns weren't being met.
Yeah. There's a lot of things there. So like, cancel culture is terrible. And, some people probably disagree with me that it is. And I think cancel culture is terrible because it doesn't give people the ability to learn, right? If I'm afraid to say something, I'm afraid to take that chance with you to get you to see a piece of me. Because if I do say it, I'm going to be canceled. So because of that fear, I'm choosing to do nothing. So that's harmful to everyone, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. But you can't if you don't engage. Cancel culture also doesn't give people the ability to mess up, because I think some of the best conversations I had with people was, hey, man, let me ask you this. What do you think about this? Right? And someone saying, oh, well, I do that. Or somebody says something and I say, hey, listen, you said this. Like, I'll give you a great example. I did a presentation at a very prestigious institution. They actually have a airport on campus. Don't look up those schools like that. And did a huge presentation. I was on Jumbotron. It was great. And a guy came over to me. He was really excited, a white guy, and he came up to me and shook my hand and he said, "You know what? This was the best presentation I've ever heard from a colored person." And to me, every day I have to choose. So like you said, people don't. I said that everybody's an educator, right? And I got to choose every day. Am I going to be this black guy or am I going to be an educator? And it's hard because you said that some people are like, oh, I don't see color. Color is a real thing. I often ask those people when they're driving, well, what do you do when you come to a traffic stop, right? You got to be able to identify colors of thing. It's not beneficial for me to flip out on individuals. It also isn't beneficial for me to carry the emotional turmoil of being able to always have to teach individuals. But some of us just carry that burden and it's fine. And I said, a colored person? And he said, yeah, that's the right word, right? And I said, no, it's not. And he just had this baffled look like I had just told him this brand new thing. And he said, well, I'm confused. And I said, what are you confused about? He said, I'm part of the local branch of my NAACP, and I'm an active member. And if you look at what the acronym stands for, CP, colored persons, I thought because it was in the name, that was the proper thing to say. And I looked at him and I said, I can see how you said that. And I can understand that could be confusing, right? Without that dialogue, we don't see each other's perspective, right? We just argue. And the terrible thing about all of this work is George Floyd was murdered. We thought that the country was coming to task, and for a minute it was, because now people are asking their friends and everybody's looking at each other differently. Like, how do you feel? Like, what if that wasn't George? What if that was me? And I have to think about that too. When you think about Ahmaud Arbery just running down the street, killed. Sandra Bland driving, killed. I can't remember this young man's name. I want to say his name's Elijah. I think he may have been on the spectrum, and they killed him. He was unarmed, and I've never, despite the advantages that I've had in this country, despite the privileges that I've had to be able to speak on stages and meet a lot of people, I've never for a second took it for granted that I could be a hashtag tomorrow, right? Breonna Taylor could be me. George Floyd could be me.
Elijah McClain, right?
Elijah McClain. There it is. Did I say Elijah?
You did.
Man, that story just kills me because you got to think about it. Taking a life is a crazy thing, right?
Right.
But you're taking it away from someone that you know has special needs. There's something that's right. And he was saying, if you ever look at his last words that are manuscript, he said, I think differently than others. I listen to the police, right? And they still killed him. And that's not an anti-police message. I think there are great law enforcement officers out there. For the ones that are killing others, it's hard for the public to trust. So you had this call to action, right? All these organizations saying, here's our diversity statement. This is how we're going to change and make our companies more inclusive. We're giving $50,000 to this, and we're hiring this person. So that was the rise of all these DEI trainers, all of these DEI director positions, all of these people doing equity work within businesses. And then MSNBC puts out an article that says now in 2023 that 35% of those jobs that were created countrywide to address inequities within organizations, they no longer exist.
Wow.
And I believe that because everybody wants to get in front of things. I was seeing companies that I didn't care what their equity statement was. Like, there were companies like Snickers. They're like, we stand with everybody. Okay, can you make a good chocolate bar? Like, thank you for that. But, it's not enough to just write it, right? The NFL is a big target about it all the time. Do I think they want to do some things right? I think so, because without the players, they don't have a league.
They don't have a league.
But you gotta show the actionable steps behind it, right? So when I say I was doing this work before it became popular, this work isn't what people say this work is, right? And I find a lot of times I'm trying to defend the work rather than just do the work. So, like, for example, some people say this work is critical race theory. That's not it. Critical race theory is critical race theory. It's not DEI, right? People are saying, well, this work makes white people feel bad. You're telling white people they're bad because they're white. You're telling students of color, they're oppressed. You know, you're teaching LGBT students that they should be gay as if there's like a manual, right? And I try to get to tell people that that's not this work. This work is, I'm going to show respect to everyone with my words, my actions, my body language. I'm going to take responsibility for the things I say and my choices. I'm going to use kind words. I'm going to accept people who are different than me. I'm going to treat others the way that they want to be treated. I'm going to use safe language. I'm going to use empathy to imagine how others feel, right? A lot of times I see things in the workplace that are gender related, right? Where women will speak up and say something in a meeting, no one hears them, and then there's a male on the other side says literally the exact same thing. Everybody says, "Oh, that's brilliant." They give all the accolades to that male. I'm like, no, she just said that, right?
Right.
So even as a black male, when we talk about intersectionality, I hold many different identities, right? I'm a dad, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a community member, I'm a community volunteer, I'm an administrator, I'm a trainer, I'm a black man, I'm a Christian black man. Like, there's so many different things that you hold that if you don't hold something that someone else has, you have to think about, if that was to happen to me, how would I digest that, right? And that's hard for people to see, especially when they feel like their morals, their values, and what they hold to be true are being attacked. I don't want to attack anybody. And I think there have been a lot of examples of people doing this work and having it be combative. I don't want to be combative with you. I want to be an active listener. I want to see your side of it. And even if I walk away being like, you know what, I didn't agree with that at all, I still know what your side is. And I think we can do it without being nasty. I think we can do it without mudslinging. I think we can do it without calling names. I think we can do it without jumping to conclusions. I think we can do it with people not feeling their shame. Listen, I know that there's no white person today that's walking around that's responsible for slavery. It's not a thing, right? But we got to be able to look at the things that are inequitable in the country right now and figure out how we make it better, right? We got to think about what's the best way for us to connect people that are in need, people that, have, you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Those bottom basic needs aren't met. So how do we address those things for people? So it's a tricky political way to do this work. But if people take a second and they look at the advantages and the development and the successes of DEI work, it is literally changing lives. The next generation, we're not too far removed from this work. So you're talking about when slavery was taking place, and then Jim Crow, and then the Black Codes, and then the redlining. So now you can only live in certain places. You can only get certain jobs. We talk about World War II, which I think is the biggest economic divide that happened in the country, and people don't really understand that. These men went off to war with the promise of the GI Bill, which is great. And they came back, and for people who met certain standards, they were able to use the GI Bill to its biggest effect. Right. Black people could not do that. They simply could not. I think the hardest thing about understanding that is when black men came back from the war, they couldn't use the GI Bill to their greatest potential because they said, yeah, you can go to college with this GI Bill, but if the college didn't accept black folk there, you couldn't go there. So do I have to relocate to go get education? They said, hey, we're going to give you, we're going to give really good loans for you to go get housing because you served in the army.
But you couldn't live in a certain area that you wanted to be, right?
But because of redlining, you could only be in certain areas. This country is the only country that I know that housing directly affects the type of school district you live in. If you have lower income housing, you have lower income school districts. So that means that the students aren't having the same experiences as other districts just because people live in higher priced homes that are in a higher priced area. No matter where everybody is, everybody should be getting the same education. That's simply not happening, right? So you talk about people being put in these areas, right? Because even when we talk about slavery, they quantified it to people that worked for free, right? Stolen people from the land that worked for free. The country generated $400 billion off of that labor. Where'd that money go?
Right.
Because it didn't go to people. That created a divide. People don't understand that. So when there was already a divide, then you had Jim Crow, then the Black Codes, then redlining, and then people went to war and they came back. All these people that went to war, that went to go buy these homes, were able to then give their homes to the next generation. I mean, it keeps happening every generation. It takes six generations to get out of poverty, right? And we're talking about people who haven't even stepped up to the plate to be able to give a chance to get even one generation out of poverty. Now, you'll hear people say, well, that's their fault. They didn't work hard enough. They didn't do this. There's a different line there that other people have to walk. And until people can understand that, or even take an opportunity to say, you know what? I understand that the tests have been different, right? People say, well, look at you, Justin. You're a black man, so obviously you made it, so anybody can do it.
Yeah, I get that one a lot too.
People don't understand that I've clawed, I've fought, I've given blood, sweat, and tears. I was in places where people counted me out. I took a lot of disrespect to my face, behind my back. I've had people underestimate me my entire life. And I still got here. And I'm saying that it only takes one instant. And I can think back to my journey up to this point. It could have been one instant where if I didn't have a different perspective, you know, we all hold privileges. One of the privileges that I hold is that I had a 2-parent household. A lot of people don't have that privilege. It would have only taken one situation for me to be like, I'm done with this.
Right.
And I had tools to help me be successful, right?
And can you highlight a little bit more on some of those, or one of those scenarios where, you know, you knew which way to go, or you had a fork in the road and you saw maybe one way wasn't the most the right way to go, and how you managed and how you thought and how you kept your emotions kind of in check to handle that situation?
I've had a numerous amount of those experiences, and I think that's why I love working in education, because I want to be that educator that I didn't have. When you look at us in education, Black folk don't make a lot of education, right? We're not really seen. We're not in the classroom. We're not in the midst, especially Black men, because education is very much a women-dominated field. So a lot of times, seeing a Black man in education is like seeing a unicorn, right? And you get shoulder tapped for a lot of things. But I remember being in my guidance office in 9th grade. They asked me what I wanted to do, and I said I wanted to be a psychologist because I wanted to help people. And I wholeheartedly remember my psychologist saying, I don't think that's for you. You sure you don't want to go do a trade, do something, work with your hands? And at that point, I was a 2nd-gen college student. Both my parents had already had degrees. It wasn't really a choice whether or not I was going or not, right? Like, because of our history, my parents said very poignant things to me. Like, our ancestors, it was illegal for them to read. So you're going to read. It was illegal for them to go to school. We'll talk about Ruby Bridges being the first person to integrate schooling, right? It was illegal prior to that for her to go to that school. And Ruby Bridges is still alive. So you're going to go to school because your people cannot. It was illegal to be able to read and write. You're going to learn to be a good writer. So people don't understand that there are generational curses that some people cannot pull themselves out because they just started. People who have already been running down the track for generations are way down there, where some people are just still at the starting line. And you have to ask, why are they at the starting line? Are we responsible for the family that we grew up in? Absolutely not. Are you responsible for the area or environment you grew up in? Absolutely not. Are you responsible for the finances that your parents or guardians brought before you? Absolutely not. So what you find is that individuals are not responsible for all these things, but yet everybody wants to blame them because they're not at this point in the race. And
and I think really a lot of the time, sorry to cut you off on that one. I agree. And I think a lot of the time folks really focus on like the dollar count, like the bank account,
Yeah.
like, oh well, my parents didn't have any money either, and we had to work hard for X, Y, and Z. But the intangibles that are not included are the accessibility, right? Just like you mentioned, colleges won't accept you there. You can't go live over there. You can't go work over there. You can't go to this school. These are things beyond what a financial history of one family, versus another, or compared against another, can measure and compare. And starting to explain those things, and now that I'm glad that we're talking even more about this. And then one of the podcasters that actually helped me develop this show, his name is Andreas Hale. Him and WWE superstar Big E are launching a promotion called Our Heroes Rock, and their first feature is Ruby Bridges. So it's really excellent that we're putting these stories out there for people to hear and just gain perspective on, without, like you said. And I think the key really is like the name callers and the naysayers and the mudslingers. Those are the loudest. They get the most sound bites. They get the most retweets. But us having these conversations need to be louder than them. We need to be retweeting ourselves. We need to be, in those type of just so people can hear, what we're
Right.
talking about and what we have to say.
So the people that are upset about this work, I ask them the straightforward questions. They're like, well, you're teaching white kids that they're bad because they're white. I said, okay, give me an example of what that looks like. Do I go up to a white student and say, hey, you're white, you're bad? It's not a thing. Well, it's guilt. Guilt has never worked for anyone. If people don't feel guilty about the atrocities that have happened in this country, they're never going to feel guilty, right? So it's not guilt. It's something inside someone that says, I identify that something's not right here. I don't want to earn it. I don't want to own it, but I also don't want to be blamed for it. So what I try to tell people is, if you're not happy with the current state of how things are going, get involved, right? So if people are upset about something, you got to figure out why they're upset. And instead of saying, well, they're upset because of this, no, what are they upset about? And what can I do to do my part? There are many different groups of people that are upset about things that do not directly affect me, but I still got to do my part. I still got to be able to be a support. I still got to be an ally. Some people call it allies, some people call it accomplice. You got to be a part of it. So a lot of times when I'm voting, I'm not voting on things that directly impact me, because there are things that directly impact people that I love,
Right.
or directly impact my daughters. I have 2 girls, right? A lot of this legislation that's getting passed is against women, and I got to think about what's best for my daughters in a world that doesn't necessarily see them as equals, right? Compared to men or compared to each other. And they're Black women. So there's a lot of hurdles that they're going to have to jump to get to the same starting place as everybody else. And I got to be able to prepare them for that. Like, people don't understand, like, Black parents have different conversations with their kids than other parents do. It's a thing. I remember my parents talking to me about, when you go to the store, don't put your hands in your pocket. If you're not going to buy it, go in there. Make eye contact with the manager. Make sure you smile. If someone comes up and asks you if you need help, even if you don't need help, you tell them you need help, right? And I remember telling some of my white colleagues about this, and they were like, that's crazy, Justin. I said, I've been in places where I did not follow those rules, and people would follow me in stores. And they're like, but you're like a nice guy. It doesn't matter if you're a nice guy. I still follow some of those rules today, because you just don't want to be a George Floyd. You don't want to be an Elijah McClain. It doesn't mean that it's just at the hands of officers. We talked about Ahmaud Arbery. He just went for a run. I used to love going on jogs until the Ahmaud Arbery situation. I don't think any of my neighbors would do that. Right. But there's a level of fear here because people view you as a fear, right? So I tell people, if you watch the news, you might be misinformed. If you don't watch the news, you can be uninformed. But if I watched the news and believed every single thing that it said, I would fear people that look just like me. So when people see my baby pictures, they say, "Oh, you were so cute," and then I want to know at what age do I become a threat? Because now I look different. So when I walk onto the scene, if I don't have a smile on my face, I'm like, "Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing?" Everybody's like, "Okay, we're safe." If you don't know who I am, I could be viewed as a threat. And when people are scared and they're fearful, they're trying to look out for themselves, and that makes sense. But my
Yeah.
skin color shouldn't be a determinant of whether or not I'm a threat or not.
And a lot of folks operate on that fear because that
Yeah.
is what's driven. That's the main message is who we should fear, why we need to shut this person down or this group, and it becomes very overwhelming if you're just really trying to go out and do your day to day activities and be social and be an
Yeah.
educator. It's a tough task, and I definitely love. Um, how this conversation is going and everything
I love,
that's been
I
discussed.
love what you just said. I love what you said. No one chooses to be in poverty. There might be some people that choose by their actions, but initially, no one's like, "Man, I can't wait to work as hard as other people. Boy, I wish I don't have those advantages that other people have." Or no one sets out to be non-successful. That's not a thing, right? Most
Right.
people would take opportunities if it was given to them. Um, Sometimes opportunities are given to you. Sometimes you take opportunities. Um, I try to tell students all the time, you all, especially our students of color, like you all reflect on the Black heroes, right? So Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Ruby Bridges. Um, man, I'm looking at, I can't remember his name. Chadwick Boseman played him as a baseball player. Jackie
Jackie
Robinson. You look
Robinson, yep, from
at
Pasadena,
the
right here.
West. You think about
Hmm.
Thurgood Marshall. You think about Dr. Maya Angelou, and those are the legends in our community, right? And I'm trying to tell individuals that they can no longer be your legends. You got to become the legends for the next generation. You're
Hmm.
going to be like Dr. Maya Angelou. You could serve on the Supreme Court. You can go be the president of the United States. Like that, those opportunities are available to you now. They
Right.
weren't available 100 years ago. I went and spoke in colleges that if it was 50 or 60 years prior to this, they would not let me on campus, let alone to speak in an auditorium. So there are opportunities out there, but not everybody has an equal access to those opportunities.
And as legendary as all those individuals that you mentioned are, the fact of the matter is that somebody's got to pick up the ball, somebody's got to grab the baton and advance to the next stage. And you're right. I mean, we definitely wouldn't be anywhere close to where we are without all of them plus more. But it is up to us to culture our youth to educate ourselves to put us in an opportunity to keep the momentum going. And I want to, speaking of keeping the momentum going, I think that's what you've done with some of your personal endeavors. And I want to
Yeah.
definitely make sure we touch on those, especially. I think we should probably start. Let's say we start with Onward and Upward. You said
Yeah.
it's a college prep program. Tell me a little bit more about that. What kind of how you developed that, and I'll give the floor back to you.
Yeah. I just saw, I mean, it's documented, so you can look up data. Um, they build prisons by the reading level of students in third grade, privatized
Mm,
prison. And that just struck me to my heart because again, some of these children are not choosing their environments. They're not choosing this. There's a famous poem that was written and it was from a student in Baltimore, and the poem is entitled Because I Didn't Have a Pencil. Right? Have you ever heard that poem before?
no, but now I'm putting it on my
I'm gonna
list to
I, I'm
look
gonna
up.
recite it. I'm gonna recite it for you.
Okay,
It says
perfect.
he says, I wake up hungry because I didn't have dinner. I try to go brush my teeth, but there's no water. I go downstairs to fix myself lunch. No one's in the house but my sister. I make sure that my sister gets to school on time. So that means I have to wake my sister up to get her ready. We both barely make it to the bus because our house is very far from the bus stop. We get on the bus. Students are yelling and screaming. I get to school. I make sure that my sister gets to class okay. I get into the classroom and the teacher's yelling at me. because I don't have a pencil. And the poem's called Because I Didn't Have a Pencil. So when we look at the achievement gap, it's hard for students who've never had the opportunity. I had parents that went to college and were able to teach me the college game, right? I went to the TRIO program, which was funded by the U.S. Department of Education. I've had experiences and opportunities that I know people that were next to me did not have. I'm telling you that I've had friends that took 8 AP courses in high school. They were some of the smartest individuals I've ever met in my entire life. Couldn't cut it in college because they were not set up to be successful there. And they were some of the smartest cats I ever met in my life. So how do we address the opportunity gap? Well, you address it with information. I never wanted to walk around with information and be the only person that had it, right? Whether that's how do you apply for college? What are the things you're paying for? Tuition, room and board, books, other fees. I never wanted to have students just think about what is a college tour? Why should I go? I never wanted to have information for tutors. I mean, there are so many retired teachers that just want to give back in afternoons. Can you give us an hour in the afternoon to interact with some students and give them some extra help? No student wants to be illiterate. No student wants to be left behind. No student wants to be behind in a reading level, right? And you find these 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders, they're reading on 4th or 5th grade levels. And people are like, well, that's the parents' part. What about the parents? Well, the parents weren't set up to be successful. So now the kids aren't successful. Is it the kids' fault? No. Is some of it their responsibility? Yeah. But what I feel like we do is we play the blame game. And I just never want to sit on information. Information is powerful. So we created this program. It's a college prep program, after school venue, retired teachers, to just talk about experiences after high school. Because for some people, high school is everything, right? They don't see that world that exists outside of their small town. They don't see a world that exists after 12th grade. They don't see a world after sports, right? I'm a great athlete in high school. I could have went to a D1 or D2 school, but no one ever talked to me about it. So now that was it. You know how many local legends that I know who could have just made it, but no one ever said to them, hey, you could parlay that into a basketball scholarship or a track scholarship or swimming scholarship or a golf scholarship and figure out how to do this thing. I never wanted to sit on information. So these are just trained individuals that help with resume and cover letter writing, helping students figure out what's that next step. If they don't have that person to say, hey, this is the next step for you, figure out what you want to do. It's all about preparation, right?
Yeah.
The 5 P's. Prior preparation prevents poor performance. So you got to help people help themselves. And I never want to say, oh, well, I got me and I got mine, so we're good.
Right.
I want to help all
gotta
students.
Reach out, pay it forward.
People think because I'm a black man, I only want to help black kids, and that's not true. We're here to support all students, just like this DEI. It's not a them versus us. It's everybody. We're all in this together. A rising tide lifts all boats. So there's no one to blame. There's also no one who's oppressed. There's no one who's at fault. We got to help each other, right? Any student that needs help, regardless of what it is, you should lend your hand to help them because that's what we're here for. I told you at the beginning of the session, I'll continue to say, we're all educators. We all have something to give. So that program's been around for about 7 years. It's great.
I'm gonna leave the link in the the bio section of the podcast for people to check out as well. And then just also want to also ask you about the diversity awareness program as well too. Tell me more about that as well.
So the diversity awareness program was born out of having those dialogues, regarding backgrounds, experiences, identities, and culture, and people, providing a safe space for people to be able to ask questions. And, I tell people all the time, there's no such thing as a safe space, right? Anybody can interrupt that space and make it not safe. Like if I come into a room and I say, the Cowboys are the best team ever, that's idiotic, right? And now the space is no longer safe, right? You got to create these brave spaces. But being brave requires you to tap into a vulnerability piece of yourself. Nobody wants to be vulnerable, right? And it's hard for people because if I'm vulnerable, I'm exposed. And if I'm exposed, you're going to get me. But no, we're both going to come and be exposed. We're both going to be vulnerable. Let's jump into this. Let's see where we go, right?
Right.
And that's kind of where this went. So my job is to help companies and organizations, police departments, institutions of higher learning, teachers. I mean, I've been through the whole gambit. I mean, I've done Lockheed Martin, I've done Macy's, I've done, big corporations, just trying to figure out how do we make this work? We got people at our company, but they're not happy to be here. Why? What are we doing wrong? How do we become more culturally proficient? How do we become more culturally sustaining? How do we do better with recruitment and retention? So that's kind of where those trainings come. I think the bulk of that training, I would say maybe about 80% of it at the time, I have my full-time work that I'm doing now, so I no longer do a lot of consulting. If I do, it's on my own time and on the weekends. But I would say the majority of them are college students that are in student groups. They're RAs, they're student leaders, they work at the front desk, they're athletes, they're the people that are going to be in positions of power in about 4 to 6 years. And I always try to tell people, name one person that you had in your life who was influential for you and think about their traits. You might not have those traits prevalent in yourself, but everybody has the ability to have any trait. Some of them just show up more prevalent than others. But remember how that person made you feel. Do you have the ability to be that for someone else?
Yeah. And you know what? I'm going to extend that challenge out to the audience. To just think of that person or a group of people or multiple people, if that's the case, that have influenced you and what their traits are and what that meant to you and how you can embody those things and reach out and help the next person. I think that's a phenomenal aspect of what you do and how you reach and get to people in that way. That's really important.
Even though it was painful in my journey, I mean, I've had some really, really bad supervisors. Really bad. Had no business supervising. Should never have been around people. Just bad.
We've known those people too. Yeah.
So my job has always been to never do the things that they did. So now I'm in a position of power. I want to listen to people. If I make a mistake, I'm going to just come to the room and say, hey, sorry, I messed up. If somebody messes up, and I'm angry about it, instead of tearing them down, I seek to understand. So I say, well, can you help me understand this? I want to seek to assassinate, because our job is to build up these individuals, right? Because they're a representation of you. And I want to be an open door where someone says, listen, I'm having a problem. Can you help me? Because we're here to be supportive. If you can't show up and care about people, people don't think you support them. And that's hard, right? Because we want to be organizations of change. We want to be organizations of peace. We want to be organizations of production and teamwork and efficiency. But you can have one person in that team that can mess all of that up. And I just never wanted to supervise individuals that way. I wanted to treat people knowing that they're humans. They may have kids. They have extenuating circumstances. They could be sick. They could be pregnant. They could be tired. They could have a bad night. They could need a mental health day. They could need something. We got to be able to give more to people. And I think that's what people recognized when COVID happened. They're like, if I die tomorrow, they're going to put my job description online. If I get fired, they're going to replace me tomorrow. Why am I killing myself for this organization that doesn't care about me? So organizations around the country need to figure out, all organizations, how do we understand human behavior? How do we make our organizations more feasible for people, right? There are some organizations that are like, you know what? If online doing remote work works, let's just do it, right? How do I accommodate people within reason? It's that human aspect. I said at the beginning, either you care about people or you don't. So I think if organizations take more of that approach, I think we can get more people back in the workforce, because some people still aren't back in the workforce. There are places that are still lacking in personnel. And I don't think it's a reflection of the workers. I think it's a reflection of the organization. And that's hard to swallow, right? Like, it's our fault no one wants to work for us. But you got to figure out, why don't people work and how do we get people through those doors? Recruitment and retention, very serious topic.
Right. And it's a really good point to kind of focus on some of what the organizations can be doing differently because, and, you know, a lot of the organizations that we know of and a lot of them that we are constant consumers of, the Googles and, you know, all these other different places are having to come up with these different kind of solutions that maybe some of these smaller organizations can pick up and follow as soon as they have seen it being successful in one area or
Yeah.
in one place.
Y'all, you need to build loyalty. You know those super go-getters that work so hard at your organization that your organization could not do anything. Like if someone's listening to this right now, think about it. Who's that person that's at your job that works their tail off and is loyal to that company, right? Some companies can't afford to lose those people, right? So what do you do to reward their loyalty? What do you do to reward their hard work? Pizza parties ain't doing it no more.
No.
Right? What do we do? How do we become more culturally sustaining? Okay, so we recognize our company. Did we take off for Rosh Hashanah? Did we take off for Yom Kippur? Did we take off for Eid? Did we take off for Diwali? Did we take off for Juneteenth? What are we sending in our emails? How do we want to let people know that I see you? You mattered, you always mattered, and you will always matter. Period.
Always. And here at the Parallax Effect, that is the message that we want to send. All the listeners, we really, really appreciate your time tuning in. All of you matter. That's a good kind of synopsis of the whole conversation today. I really want to definitely thank Justin Brown for joining us. This has been awesome,
Yes.
above and beyond anything I expected. I knew he was going to bring it, but now that you brought it, like I'm even more excited. And the one question that I didn't get for you though before we wrap up is
Yeah.
your role at NASA. I just want everybody to know because you know what is an idea practitioner? Like everybody thinks like, are you going to the moon tomorrow, or are you going to be televising from the space station?
Listen, this NASA, wonderful organization to work for, man. Just some of the brightest minds and some of the nicest people you've ever met. And this opportunity just landed on my lap. I mean, I applied for it, went through a couple stages of questioning. But the idea practitioners, right? We work with the astrophysics database, right? Our job is to evaluate inclusion plans that NASA does. NASA does DEI work, right? So if you don't think DEI work's a real thing, right? Look at what the smartest people in the world are doing. They're doing inclusion plans for scientific proposals, right? The astrophysics division has this plan pilot program, right? And in this database, the idea practitioners are evaluating the inclusion plans of scientific proposals, scientific ideas that are submitted, right? And our job is to be able to say, I think that this could be broader. I think this is how you could bring more people in and be able to be a lens that they might be missing. I mean, I don't know how many black folk you see at NASA. They exist, but they're not a lot. How do we pull other people that may not be involved in the science world, but how do we get them involved? How do we look at things? How do we create better access? How do we lower barriers? NASA's at a really pivotal point of doing some great work. They're not a little bit moving the needle. That needle's moved. So this work isn't harmful. No one's trying to take over the country or make people feel bad. People just are saying, hey, I want to be here too. Mm-hmm. And I want to have a say, and I want to have, the ability to have the white picket fence and be able to do it. So we got to give people those opportunities, and people that are wanting those opportunities, we got to give them the information so that they can figure out how to do it for themselves.
And speaking of giving out that information, can we connect people here with your socials, or how do the folks here, if they want to follow up with you, contact you
Absolutely. Professionally, you can contact me on LinkedIn. I'm there, Justin Brown. You can type in Diversity Awareness Program. I will pop up there. If you're on IG, you can type in Diversity Awareness Program. I will pop up there. I'm also on Twitter, JL as in lying, or lion, or laughing, or lollipop. Yeah, I don't know the lion part.
Yeah,
JL
Brown. A good one.
Yeah, JL Brown 11. And that's the Twitter handle. But man,
and I'll have all those links. Provide them in the on the YouTube channel, on all the platforms that we're on, so you guys can link up with Justin, man, because this is a phenomenal individual doing phenomenal things and been doing it for a very long time. Again, my name is Ryan Lavelle. This is the Parallax Effect. And while we're on it, Parallax Effects on Twitter. That's Parallax Effects with an S on Twitter, and Parallax Media on Instagram. Let us know how we did. Let me know how I can do better. Communicate. We want to know how you feel about our content. And it's been real. It's been awesome. And I really appreciate Justin Brown, man. I called him up and immediately was like, I'm on. Just tell me when. And it was me who was, all right, let's do this day. Let's do that day. So I had to get my schedule together. So thank you so much for being patient. But you came and brought everything I wanted you to bring, man. So it's been excellent. So again,
thank you.
Yeah, for sure, man. Signing off for myself and Justin. We'll see you next time on the Parallax Effect. It's been a great one. Everybody have a great day. And keep it moving and stay ready, stay prepared, stay informed, and be an educator.